Most companies have a GTM strategy, but very few have a GTM that actually gets the money. If your go-to-market feels like a series of broken spreadsheets and missed targets, it's time for a system update. Welcome to GTM, get the money live. I'm Chris Ryan and I'm Leah Parillo, your hosts, and we're here to install the operating system for your revenue. We're moving past the theory and getting into the high-stakes execution of what it takes to scale in 2020 fast.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to GTM Get the Money, our continued live series that goes out every single week on LinkedIn. We have another exciting new guest, Ken Kramer, which Leah will introduce. But welcome, Leah. Welcome, Ken. If you haven't seen GTM Get the Money, it's a fun show. There's no rules. It's all about finding and addressing revenue problems that stop and prevent companies and people at the end of the day from growth. Our mission solely is if we deliver good revenue to good people and good companies, they give back to those around them. We work with purpose-driven companies, and we bring purpose-driven people on. So without further ado, Leah, please say hello to Ken.
Hello, Ken. How are you today? So I'm very happy to introduce Ken Kramer, who has been not only someone that I've worked with in marketing, but also a friend. Since when, Ken? About 2018-ish? Somewhere in there. It's been a while.
I'm going to say 17-ish.
17-ish. Okay. So I worked in marketing with Ken when he was at Teraline, and now he's at Location Analytics, Inc. And he really is an expert in what he does as a fractional CEO. He also does GTM consulting. He's a GTM partner. So I'm really happy to have Ken here. He knows his stuff, and excited for this podcast today. Oh, Ken, we really wanted to find out from you, from your experience, what happens in a company that doesn't have great positioning revenue-wise? Like, what have you seen in the past in companies like that?
So great question. And just to fill in a little background first, but I got my start in the software world as we keep dating ourselves, the mid-90s. I think my second core job at MapInfo was in product marketing, product management, bringing new products to market. And that was really, it was great to actually leverage some of what I went to school for, getting marketing degrees and an MBA, and being able to apply it to bring new products to market. So I'm definitely a believer of the fundamentals of marketing, the foundational 4 Ps of marketing. I do prefer to kind of switch the word promotion for positioning, because the 4th P in promotion really is, what's your message to the market? How does your product fit in, and how do you want people to perceive it in the market? In doing that, it really forces you to learn and do all of the right things ahead of time. You need to understand what your customer is, do customer discovery, know their problem inside and out, so that you're building the right product being that first P. And understanding what the market looks like, so that you have a differentiator and you can position your product appropriately. Somehow over the years, as technology and many other things have evolved, people look at marketing. I think at one point in time it was, all right, let's do events or advertising. And then we got into a lot more digital marketing with direct email and ABM and that type of thing. And it's all excellent, but none of these things work alone, and none of these things work simply by volume. You have to actually have the right message that resonates with the right person you're targeting, and with the right product and solution for that person. And then you also have to get a little bit lucky and hit the right time, because as we all know, not everybody is just because they're the right target doesn't mean they're the right target today. But I've walked into situations where companies had a good product, they had existing customers, and when I tried to figure out just looking at their website what they did, and it was a space that I was extremely familiar and adjacent to for years and years, I had no idea what their product actually did. And if you can't um, position the product for what it does and the problem it solves, uh, uh, it, all of those other efforts that you're spending money on in marketing will be fruitless.
Hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let me ask you a question, because I think positioning means a little bit of a different definition to different people. We all heard like right person, right message, right time. I guess I have two questions. The first one is, with all of the digital, evolution, we'll say, and AI, especially recently, to me, it feels like it's noise. Like there's just people are just putting content out for the sake of putting content. So how does that impact positioning, and then how does that impact revenue?
Yeah. So first off, I agree entirely, and I've used that term of noise often. I walked into one fractional role. Um, it was odd to me. They had a 3-to-1 ratio of SDRs to sales reps. So more people that were developing opportunities, three of them for each one sales rep they had. And the things they were measuring on and the activity, they were measuring on every activity they did, which was great. But when I looked at the sheer volume of what they were doing and the amount of noise they were creating, and they couldn't figure out why it wasn't overloading the sales rep with legitimate good opportunities. It was just noise they were creating. Um, the volume was out of this world, and the message was wrong. So it's getting harder and harder. I firmly believe, because we've done such a great job on technology to make it easy to reach thousands upon thousands of people over and over again. It's getting harder to be heard. I completely agree with that. So to get through that noise is more difficult, but you can't get through that noise with more noise. You have to actually have a message with- that is something that resonates with that potential user.
So there's a lot of schools of thought on messaging, and I like your point, right? You have to have, I hate to say like the right noise, but with the quantity of sheer volume that's happening now, what are the steps to get your message to a point where you're saying, okay, now we can leverage quantity. Now we can start putting this to market. Like, is there a pattern you follow? Do you go like the Donald Miller style and do like a story brand where it's very simple and concise, or you do cute and funny and ethereal messaging? Like what's your jam, I guess?
Yeah, my my first belief is, let's make it simple and understandable.
Hmm.
I walked into one company, and it was one of the places where I'd worked with Leah prior, and they had a very um, timely, quippy like tagline. And I'd listen to the CEO give a pitch to everybody, and every time he would say the tagline, he then explained it because he had to. So it was cute and clever and timely for what was happening in the technology world at that moment. And they were trying to do a play on something. And I keep in mind, he acquired my company, so I'm working for him. And I went up to him and I said, you have to change that. And he's like, yeah, I know. Um, because you can't have something that you have to keep explaining what it means. It's like when we try to tell jokes and then have to explain them. It's not the right approach. So I typically try to boil things down first, just to be clear and concise. And then if there's things that you can play on that might make things more sticky, great. But going back to one of the questions you had in there made me think, years ago, you used to have to hit somebody 7 times, and then it
Hmm.
was 12 times. And quite frankly, I don't know what the number is now. I think it's like 17 or 18 times for something to sink in and resonate to that same person. And to me, it's not hitting them with 17 emails. It's LinkedIn, email, other advertising, um, events. It's multiple different channels showing up in all of those right places.
Hmm. When you come in as a fractional and you see that issue with positioning, communication, and a lot of times sales and marketing gets blamed for that, right? What do you do as a fractional or as a CEO in general?
Yeah, it's typically it's marketing that gets blamed. Sales doesn't for anything.
Never.
Very true.
I did have a colleague who I looked at once and I said, "So you're telling me if you're successful in sales that it's because you and your guys are great, and if you're not, it's because of marketing?" And he said, "Yes," without recognizing how sarcastic I was being.
Yep.
I had to explain the joke to him, which was really unfortunate.
Yeah. That was on him though.
So, and not that I've run sales as well, which is why I believe my marketing background and the way I've approached things from bringing products to market, initially being in product management, product marketing, it was enabling salespeople to sell the product. So when I moved over into sales at one point in time, managing salespeople, I didn't just beat them up every month saying, "You got to get more, you got to get more, you got to get more." I tried to add value to their lives.
Hmm.
Let's understand where you're having issues selling. And in many times, it's how you're positioning the product and how you're competing against somebody. So it's one thing to position the product outward openly just by yourself. It's another thing at some point in time when the market gets to a certain point. If you're developing a new market, it's all about you. If you're in a market that is now established and you have 3 or 4 core competitors, you have to understand your differentiators,
Hmm.
position those um, to the prospects and the market so that you get considered above the others. You need to have a few key things to lean on. And that was one of the frustrating things walking in, seeing these solutions was, okay, now that I figured out what you do, we need to fix that message. But what are your differentiators? You're in a market, you're a 10, $15 million company competing against $100 million established name brands out there. How do we position ourselves? What are our differentiators? And let's lean on that. And then as far as creating that messaging, it's to some extent you kind of go back to the foundation where you're doing customer discovery to make sure you're building a product somebody cares for. Well, test your messaging. Um,
Hmm.
the being able to get back into live events a few years ago was great. Um, we could take an assumption that these are the right people for our product that we're targeting. So this is an event that will bring those people. Yes, we want to generate leads that will ultimately turn into revenue. But at the same time, it gives you the opportunity to have one-on-one conversations with what you think is your target market and test out your new messaging and see how it resonates and see what falls like a rock.
Do you feel like marketing is the only department that's really, supposed to do the messaging, or do you feel like it's more of a top down?
I, well, look, I think anytime I've developed new messaging internally, I go to the top, I go to the other
Hmm.
peers and try to work together. And again, this is one of the reasons I love the name of the show. I do think the term go to market has been bastardized, perhaps,
Mm.
word and used in multiple different ways, but I've been bringing products to market for years. So I've appreciated that term for years, more so until recently, but it's working across these different departments. You can't do and be successful in anything if it's a silo. Uh, that story I told you about the guy who didn't get the marketing benefit to sales, Um, he went back to crappy messaging after I left. and and then later he wasn't running sales. Um, but it's you can't do anything in a vacuum. Salespeople do have more access to customers and prospects. So you desperately want their feedback, and you want them to, they need to know the market and they need to know your product. So they're critical to have those relationships with, from a product marketing perspective. Um, but yeah, there needs to be a unified agreement at the top. Typically, I've seen the proposed messaging come from marketing, and then you get buy-in at the top, and then you proliferate it out.
Yeah, I would imagine that even customer service, right? Like once the product is sold, could also weigh in on that and be part of that discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. And customer service is, depending on the industry, has shifted
Yeah.
a little bit as they want to keep making everybody. I've always appreciated the phrase "everybody's in sales." We are now pushing that to actually be a reality. When you take tech support people and change them to customer success people and give them a quota, they're now responsible for those renewals and additional revenue. The great thing is they do have great relationships with the customers, and you hear things.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, even in product management, I learned the most when somebody would call me and say, "This customer has this issue," and I would listen, and they were often in a rough mood, to say the least, and we would address it, figure out what the issue was, figure out how we can address it from a product perspective. But then those people become the greatest champions that you have. And regardless of where you sit in an organization, you need to have relationships with customers and people that you can go to and get their feedback from. It's an ongoing thing. I don't think, you know, companies are never done. Marketing's never done. It's an evolution. You keep going, you iterate, and you try to make things better as you go. But there always needs to be that feedback piece from the customer. As soon as you think you know more than the market does, then there might be an end.
I love having you on a guest because you have an interesting perspective because you came from product and marketing and sales and you were president and you went through acquisitions. But at the end of the day, you're right. And the funniest thing to me about go-to-market GTM in general is we're tying this back together. Everyone has the answers. And then people, like you said, they're siloed and they're not talking to each other. I like how you're saying every function has a direct line of sight to the client and the customer. Because at the end of the day, it's great if we tell you how good our product is. It's much better if our customers tell you how good our product is. And that's the goal of positioning, really, from my perspective. We think of go-to-market typically, it's about bringing the functions together. And I like that you're saying, I think you're saying this, that when you bring the functions together, it's all of the purpose to understand the customer better, to be able to deliver better. Is that accurate?
I appreciate how the go-to-market effort and there's always been changes of titles. There used to be VPs of marketing, VPs of sales, and then there's chief sales officers and then chief revenue officers, and then sales ops went to rev ops. And some of those things made sense because they were trying to say, from a rev ops perspective, the revenue doesn't just come from sales. It also comes from the customer success team with those renewals and other sources. And that's fine. I get that. I'm okay with that. The chief revenue officer role starts in many cases to kind of usurp marketing and customer success. And at that point is when I say, isn't that the CEO's job? The CEO should be over everything. They are over everything. If the chief revenue officer is now over sales, marketing, and customer success, all the CEO needs to do is talk to that person and maybe, the head of development. So and the natural progression for this was, usually VPs of sales become CROs and then they take over sales and marketing and customer success. And quite frankly, many of them are not great at it. I fully admit, as more of a marketing guy who's been a CMO, who's also managed sales, I have my limits on how big of a sales organization I want to manage. I don't think I should be in position to manage a 100-person sales organization. Yet somebody who just elevated to CRO role, who's never done marketing, thinks they're in a position to manage a 30-person marketing organization.
When you have a small company, you wear a lot of hats. Everybody's wearing many hats to run different departments. And then companies get bigger, and then everybody has a job, and it's usually the best person for that function of the job. Put them together. But once you get to the CRO, and I'm not picking on CROs, but when you're tasked to do multiple functions, now you're going even higher, and you're thinking putting hats together is a good idea. It may be a good idea, it may not, but to me, I'd rather have a kick-ass CMO, a kick-ass chief sales officer. Ken, what's one takeaway that people could do today that would help them impact their positioning and therefore impact their revenue?
I would have one of your parents go read about what you do and see if they get it.
Hey, that's scary.
That's really good.
Find somebody not in your world and see if they don't have to get it fully, but they got to get it a little bit.
Yeah.
Find people. It doesn't have to be, one of your parents. It could be anybody, but somebody that doesn't work for your company, somebody that potentially doesn't work for your industry. Just have somebody say, do you have any idea what we do and why we're good at it?
So good.
That is a scary question, because if I ask my mother, who's still learning how to use the VCR, I don't know how that would land, but I'll sit down with our friends and they don't know what we do. You keep going back to kind of that story brand concept, the simple, concise, say what you do. As marketers, we all want to be super creative and clever, and I think we're all guilty of that. Get the Money, I feel like, is a good name for the show, even though it's a play on words, GTM, and go to market.
It's straightforward. It's what it's all about, because all the guys, if I'm making fun of the sales leadership side of the world, they kind of maybe look down upon marketing. But the reality is, and they say, you don't carry a bag. But the reality is coming from product, I owned a product. If that product didn't hit $1 million or $5 million, I might lose my job. I didn't succeed. So I care about revenue every bit as much as those guys. The difference, I believe, is, and I've long thought this, is that I believe in the long-term revenue, and I believe in the long-term revenue across the entire company, whereas each salesperson is, I got to make my number this quarter. It's this defined territory. It's this defined time frame, and that's great, but it needs to be balanced with, great, we just hit our quarterly number, now what? And the now what isn't scary, because the rest of the organization was prepared for the next quarter and the quarter after that.
100%. If you want to grow a company, build sustainable revenue of sustainable customers that will buy more from you, not just the quick fix. We do have a mystery question. So obviously we prep and we talk about just concepts and things we would like to cover first. Surprise, every podcast does that. But this tends to be a fun question. Sometimes it gets serious. But Ken, what's the worst piece of advice you received from people about money or spending money?
Well,
It's a good reaction, Ken.
I don't know if it was advice necessarily, but at one point in time, early in my career, I was talking to my manager and told him, and we were talking about money and finances and whatnot. And I mentioned how I was paying off my MBA student loan, and it was like $300 a month or something like that. And he's like, "Oh, that's a waste. My car payment's $300 a month. You'd be better off with a new car than that degree." Now, I don't know if that was advice or a stupid comment. He was a mid-level sales manager, and he stayed a mid-level sales manager probably for like 10 years. Good for him.
Yeah.
So kids, if you're listening, don't get an MBA. Go out and buy a car.
A lot of people say some education's overrated and it goes in waves and whatnot. I don't think learning anything is ever a waste.
Never.
And at the time I did it, it was a little bit of a pivot in my career, and it made a ton of sense. And I did it I came from the marketing side of the world, and was going to get more business, education. But I did it at RPI where they were heavily focused on teaching business stuff to engineers. So I had the opportunity. It wasn't geared definitely for me, but I had the opportunity in every class I was in to be doing projects with engineers and to be able to work with people on that other side, which probably helped me a lot in my actual career. When in product management, product marketing, you're sitting between sales, the customer, and the engineering group. I already had an understanding on how these guys work and think.
I think next time we have you on, I think we could do a whole episode about continual learning and the value. You want to learn something, learn it. If you have an interest in it, and I think that's applicable to your day-to-day life, you want to have a good work-life balance, learn about how you can make it the best possible. Again, you want to work for your company and get out of bed and have a purpose in the morning, make some money, make everybody else some money. It's a good thing to adopt of philosophy of learning, I think. Again, way sidebar on what we're talking about, but
That's true. Well, and now, Ken, you get to drive a snowmobile around, which is really cool. So
I have a snowmobile around. Which probably costs as much as the car did 30 years ago.
Yes, exactly. So there you go. Full circle.
Ken, where can people find you? What's the easiest, best way?
The easiest way would be probably through LinkedIn, Ken Kramer. I'm on LinkedIn, Kramer with K.
Okay. Yeah.
And you could find me in Location Analytics, but my email address is really long. So,
okay. I have to imagine there's several Ken Kramers on LinkedIn. I'm a Chris Ryan. There's 3 at my dentist. So is there a unique identifier? So maybe put Location Analytics in there as well? Like, is that a better way? Probably.
You put go-to-market partners. Yep. Those are two of the top ones. Or you could search for information on Leah opened up the opportunity for me to put a plug in for the Saratoga Joinery, a not-for-profit woodworking shop in downtown Saratoga that I'm affiliated with. So
You're out there.
Things that'll show up under my profile.
Gotcha. Well, prepare for millions of new followers on LinkedIn. They're all going to be the right millions customers. So someday we're going to look back at this and actually realize we have millions and be like, told you.
It could happen.
Like Mr. Beast style.
Yeah, definitely. So, well, thank you so much for joining us today, Ken, and Chris, and our audience. And we look forward to seeing you later and seeing our audience later.
Thanks,
as
Ken.
well.
Good talk. Thank you, Leo.
Okay. All right.